autonomy is a very, very dangerous thing, especially if the man is not in the loop. We all saw what the Tesla car did when man was not in the loop, because the system will respond without emotion. You can do so much. Let's look at social media also today. You can create a huge amount of misinformation and create any kind of warfare out of it. Country which rules technology will rule the world. So therefore, looking at electronic countermeasure, technologists have devised countermeasures. So this is the Tom and Jerry game which is going on in electronics. So what about a electronic or a cyber ingress? Is it an act of war? If you see by the classical definition, it is. But today, that has become a very hazy affair. Every day, a couple of ethical hackers are tasked to hack these sites, to find weaknesses, to find loose ends, to find voids and close them. It's an everyday feature.
Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achin. Today I have the privilege of being joined by Lieutenant General Anil Kapoor, AVSM, VSM. The Lieutenant General who retired as the Director General of Electronics and Mechanical Engineering from the Indian Army after a long course of service, after being commissioned into the Army in December 1981. He has had an exceptionally great academical as well as a professional career. He was awarded with a gold medal in the EME degree engineering course and the Commandant's gold medal in the Officers Radar Engineering course for standing first. He was also awarded the British Aerospace Trophy for standing first in the Master of Engineering Special Weapons Technology course for guided missiles at the Institute of Advanced Technology, Pune. So a lot of technical knowledge which we are carrying with us today. He's going to discuss with us the topic which is brewing up in front of us, electronic as well as cyber warfare. Thank you so much for joining me today, sir, and giving us insight into what this domain actually consists of. So, sir, I will just switch over into the first question. They say that the world today is a very technologically driven and innovative world. Anybody who innovates is kind of the winner. With your profound experience in this particular field and managing technology, electronics, and so on and so forth, can you tell us how the technology is impacting the world of warfare around us, sir?
Right. Let me start by saying that the new technology world order is defined by 4 Ds: data, digitization, digitalization, and disruption. And over the last 2 decades, we see a phenomenal rise in digital transformation the world over. In fact, not only warfare, technology has impacted every aspect of life. So when we look at technology conundrum, it indeed comprises the impact of digital transformation. Let me take a step back. The first war, which was called a video game war, was the first Gulf War 1991, where CNN brought the Gulf War to the drawing rooms and living rooms of everybody. And that's when one saw the technology in warfare on one end of the spectrum, whether it was missiles, whether it was radar, whether it was surveillance, whether it was tank warfare. And on the other hand, we saw the impact of media through technology. And thereafter, if you see the BPO world grew, we had the BPOs coming up, where services sector started growing again because of digital technology. Thereafter, we had the digital transformation taking off in a very big way, and we had the cyber domain, the electronic warfare domain coming up. And of course, digital transformation transformed the life to the extent that from a simple handheld phone where we used to exchange voice, We started exchanging data. We started exchanging videos. There was the SMS, then it became the MMS. And now we have smartphones. And today, you have technology in your hand in terms of a smartphone that you hold. And not only your daily life, actually, you have the whole world in your pocket today. So that is how technology is impacting. Looking at warfare and technology, coming to your main question, what we find is that the world transcended from a low end of technology to automation. So the first Gulf War showed us automation in warfare. In fact, there's the first time when we looked at an integrated battle space on the television. There was integration before it, but it was quite rudimentary. Automation, which started sometime in 80s in US and maybe 90s with us, with a lot of automation programs having taken off then, actually came of age sometime in 2000. And that's when you found globally a lot of connected networks. We started with C2 ISR, command control, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance. And today we talk of C6 ISR, command, control, communication, computers, cyber, combat, intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. And from automation, we are now getting into autonomy. And autonomy is a very, very dangerous thing, especially if the man is not in the loop. We all saw what the Tesla car did when man was not in the loop, because the system will respond without emotion. Whereas when you have man in the loop, the system will respond with emotions as well. And there are a large number of examples. And today we call it the lethal autonomous warfare system, LAWS. So the autonomous weapon systems also are into an excedency. And while with technology, we have one end of the spectrum which talks of autonomy in warfare, there's another end of the spectrum which talks of human rights, which talks of, are we doing it right? Is so much autonomy good in technology? And we do hear in Google and Facebook and other such places, we only hear and read about them, that when they did a computer to computer autonomy, they realized sometimes the systems ran amok. And that could be a dangerous proposition. Recent past, we've seen what happened in Armenia and Azerbaijan, where an autonomous warfare was on display, and it was man and machine versus autonomous technology in terms of drones. And obviously, you could drop a drone down, it is unmanned, few more will fly up. There are swarms available with countries today to do this kind of warfare where it is man versus machine. So that is yet another dimension that we have to look at. So really speaking, it's a hugely developing field, and people talk of algorithmic warfare, invisible warfare, and but we can keep discussing. There is so much to it, and maybe as we keep moving ahead, we can talk more and more about these technologies.
Interesting, sir. So what you're basically trying to say, there is ever moving development in this particular field, and the terms and the terms of warfare are going to change pretty much probably every day, with regards to how people utilize the technology which is available to them. And as well as the artificial intelligence that you're telling us about is basically something that we see around us. Very interesting. Sir, what does the Indian armed forces in general do about technology development? Because they are the end users at the end of it, of the technology which is there for them. What do they do?
Yeah, so when we look at our scenario in the Indian Army, I think we are very technology conscious army, and we also have been trying to keep in step with our requirement. In fact, in our case, fortunately or unfortunately, we have northern border, we have the western borders, which are both very active. And therefore, I think India or Indian Army or Indian Armed Forces are the best breeding grounds of technology. If you want to really use technology and see how it impacts, please get it in India, because we have active borders. We have an active insurgency. So any amount of technology that we can get or which needs to be tried out, India is a good ground that way. In our case, we do have a very formalized way of perspective planning for technology. We have a technology development roadmap, and a lot of induction happens based on this roadmap. With the integration happening through the office of the CDS, I think in times to come, we would be able to see a lot of jointness and integration, because today there is a huge convergence. I mean, when you look at communication technology, say software defined radio, and one of our mobiles is also incidentally a software defined radio, it's a common technology. When you look at AI, when you look at supply chain management through AI, when you look at blockchain, all these technologies are agnostic of the service. Whether it is Army, Navy, Air Force, all of them could make common platforms and use them for common purposes. So therefore, there is a window of technology which is, if I may say, arms specific, and there's another one which has no boundaries. Cyber as an example, electronic warfare as an example. So really speaking, there is a lot happening in this space, and I would only try and keep it at that level, because I think we should not get into an area where we get into some specifics which may not be correct to speak in a forum which is open.
Correct.
But suffice to say that every aspect of technology is being looked into by the three services and jointly as a tri-service endeavor as well. Of course, we have the
please go on, sir.
We have the DRDO, we have the defense industry, we have the defense PSUs and ordnance factories, and I think along with academia, today we do find that there is a kind of a interaction that is happening. That means the academia is a fertile ground to incubate technology, the grassroots innovations. And from there, when you germinate those ideas, you can come up with prototypes which can get into either the public or the private sector as one route. And of course, DRDO is there, which is also incubating large number of technologies. We've recently seen, even during COVID times, the challenge has been made by DG2, which has become quite a hot product in, if I may say, in the healthcare technology today. So really speaking, there is a lot of promise here. However, I would like to put in one, if I may use the word, recommendation that I would have, and I've been giving it even when I was serving, that today in the private sector and the world over, we have a chief executive officer, we have a chief technology officer. I have always asked this question: who is the chief technology officer of the three services, of the each service and the combined three services? Well, there are people looking at technology, but do we have a CTO? Some time back, we had a Army Technology Center, which was the repository of technologies. However, some years back, it was merged with the Army Design Bureau. And can we call Army Design Bureau ADG as the Chief Technology Officer? I don't think so. So really, there is a need to look at a structure. There's a need to formulate a formal technology strategy. There's a need to have a very pragmatic technology forecasting program. And if we put all these together into a well-defined work time plan, perhaps the delivery will be more precise and more well-defined.
So I think that's a very, very good recommendation, especially looking at one of our adversaries, which is one of the world leaders in terms of technology and associated programs, especially used in the military. and they're using it pretty well. One must say that. Sir, we were talking. I mean, you mentioned one of your recommendations with regards to defense R&D. What do you think should be done? So I may have just some recommendation that you would put out, so that we can continue with this particular discussion.
Okay, let me start by uh, maybe a good story.
Mhm.
The Indian Integrated Guided Missile Development Program, the IGMDP, is perhaps a striking example globally on how we should run R&D. Way back in 1983-84, this was conceived by late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who was the father of guided missiles. He was also in ISRO, where he was the father of SLV-3. He was the project director there. And that is when he envisioned how this technology can be brought into defense. And guided missiles would be a good way forward, because we always have been inducting missiles through import routes. And 5 missiles were envisioned. And I think today we find all 5 finding a place under the sun. And over a period of time, we've gone into joint ventures. BrahMos is an example, and many more which are in the offing. I think that is the way to go. We need to have a program, a focused program. And if we have a focused program, like I said, with a very good forecasting and technology development strategy, I think we can do better. Today, in DRDO, if one program we can be very happy to talk about, it is the IGMDP. Then we had the main battle tank, MBT Arjun. I think that is another good story. But like I always say, every technology has a time window. And beyond that time window, it has a shelf life. And therefore, technology is a moving target. And if technology is a moving target, your product is a moving target. It cannot be static. I think we need to create some structures. Like I said, if you have a chief technology officer, he could be working very closely to see 2 things. One is technology induction. And second, also look at technology obsolescence and take timely actions so that the technology upgrades happen much faster than what they are happening today. And that is the missing link. So I think there is a good way forward to work this way. The other I would like to highlight about is, when you look at R&D as a nation and not DRDO in isolation, I think with the networked world that we are into today, it is no grace or no great shake doing the same R&D at 5 places. There is a need to, I think, there is a need to come up with a legislation on this. There has to be an act of the parliament on technology. And this act must very clearly spell out the technology domain and the R&D domain and the product domain. Let me clarify this. If today somebody is working on artificial intelligence for COVID, anybody and everybody who wants to get into this field, there should be a regulatory mechanism. Today, a lot of human capital and financial capital is going into R&D with duplication. Rather than complement, they compete. And we are losing both time, effort, and money. I think if we can bring this kind of legislations, we will do much better to technology. So from a R&D landscape, we need to have maybe a R&D Act. From the production landscape, we need to have a Production Act. In fact, US enacted a Defense Production Act way back in 1950. And to date, they are using it most effectively. So I think there is a lot that can be done in this field if we put our head together. And I'm sure somebody in the government is definitely thinking about it. And if not, I think your forum can put in these thoughts, and for sure, somebody will take note of them.
I hope so too, sir. As a matter of fact, will it be wrong to say that the future of warfare is going to be technology based? That's
Uh, 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 Definitely so. In fact, it is already so. I mean, when we talked of 1991, it is technology versus human power.
mm,
It is numbers versus technology. Like I said, even any war you take, if you have an unmanned autonomous system, no matter how many pieces on ground you have with the best technology, I think you can take out very many. So the warfare of tomorrow is going to be technology driven. It is going to be what is being called algorithmic or invisible warfare. And that's where the world is going to go. That's where it is already gone.
mm,
Today, you have seek and respond kind of AI driven systems. And quadcopters and drones, drone warfare is all about this. The swarm technology is all about this. I mean, an unmanned system can just go and hit into a target and blast it off. The kamikaze type of attacks. When you had a pilot, you would lose an aircraft, you lose a pilot, a well trained pilot. Today, you only lose one, maybe bird with a lot of explosive in it. That's it. But the kind of damage you cause is out of proportion. Even let's look at cyberspace for a moment. Today, like I'm sitting in this room, if I'm a hacker, I'm an invisible warfare, I'm an invisible warrior doing an invisible warfare. I'm just looking at the weak bellies or weak digital bellies, if I may say. Any belly that I find digitally weak, I get in there and take out the information that I want to. It's like a surgical operation in a cyberspace.
mm,
So you need not, all you need is a very nice, maybe computer, a laptop, and a very nice software, and a very, very illustrious uh, and a crafty professional, cyber professional. He need not be IT professional also. A cyber professional with the intent of hitting you, he'll hit you. He'll hit anybody because he's only looking at the weakness, the soft
mm,
belly, soft digital belly. So really speaking, that is, and that can happen 24/7, 365.
right.
And by the time you get to know, it will already be too late. He's done it and gone. So that is the kind of warfare you're getting exposed to. And you can do so much. Let's look at social media also today. You can create a huge amount of misinformation and create any kind of warfare out of it. So it's becoming a real hybrid space today.
Mm, correct.
Warfare, nature, texture is all getting technology driven. And I feel that the country which rules technology will rule the world because technology is also today driving economy.
Mm,
Because technology is all pervading. It's not only about warfare, it is about life today. The social fabric globally is technology driven. How can economy not be so? Is my question. So there's a huge amount of congruence. There's a huge amount of commonality. There's a common denominator. You and me who are talking on Zoom today, we are able to do it. We have connected. We never knew each other. We would have never connected if we didn't have technology platforms available to connect up.
correct.
Imagine if we were talking of warfare and if we had an intent, we could do much more. So that is where we are.
Mm. It's a scary situation out there, sir. So, a lot of us want. We know the concept of just in general about electronic warfare and cyber warfare, and especially cyber warfare is a little more in the open, but electronic warfare is still a little bit hazy for a lot of us. Cyber warfare would refer to any cyber attack or anything like that. But in your opinion, I'd like you to define these two kind of warfares into something that which gives us a broad idea of or a guideline that this is what we are talking about when we say cyber warfare or electronic warfare.
Right. When you look at cyber warfare, actually, first I must tell you that there's a new term which I've been hearing called cybertronics, which is cyber plus electronics. So first, let me start from where you led me, and then I'll get into cybertronics.
Sure.
when we look at computer-based systems and networks, we must know that there's a huge amount of commonality between information systems, that is computer systems, and communication systems. After all, it's all called ICT. Now, this ICT space is where the cyber warfare resides. That means if you have a server, if you have a computer, if you are doing anything which is computer based, whether it is storing information, whether it is accessing information, whether it is creating some software to do any kind of activity, like we have nuclear power plants which are run by computers, we have power systems run by computers, we have command and control systems, we have information systems, we have C4, C5, 6 ISR systems, all based on computers. And I think when you have such a space available, a good threat is a cyber threat. That means if I can get in, either take out information, that could be one intent, or disturb your command and control structures in some form that when you want them, you'll not be able to use them. I think I've affected you badly. So that is the cyber space. I can also mutilate your data, play around with it, mutilate it, give it to people who shouldn't be having it. We've had Snowdens and we've had the world over Stuxnet, and so many such examples exist which tell us that the cyber space today is a huge space dealing with automation and autonomy. And you can affect both automation and autonomy by hitting into it. So that is the cyber part. Some time back, there was a report called Shadows in the Cloud. A Chinese hacker sitting somewhere in Canada and around produced this report called Shadows in the Cloud. And he did a huge hacking exercise involving a large number of countries, including India, including military installations, including military formations, including military formation commanders, including United Nations. And he created merry hell in the cyberspace. And that's when the whole world woke up sometime in 11, 12 to the kind of visibility people had on you unobtrusively, without you knowing. And by the time you got to know, it was very late. And then we also realized that today when we say we have deleted a particular file, it's like in our childhood, we used to write with a pencil and try and erase it with an eraser. And sometimes there was a little impression left. Today, a good cyber hacker can even decode that delete and say what it was. So that is the depth to which a cyber attack is. Now let's come to electronics warfare. Electronics warfare looks at radiation. That means all your radio frequencies that are there, all your communication by and large, other than the line communication, is based on radiation of radio frequencies.
Correct.
So it's looking at the radiation space, whether it is communication or non-communication. When I say non-communication, it is radars. So a very good electronic warfare professional will carry out what is called the electronic surveillance. He'll see what all frequencies you are using, what all frequencies you radiate it at, and he'll keep collecting data. And then that is called electronic surveillance measures.
ECM, okay.
And then he initiates something which is called a electronic countermeasure. That means he re-radiates into your receiver. Because after all, when you want to receive anything, any transmission, it has to come to your receiver. So what he does is he jams your receiver. And by jamming means he creates such kind of energies that so much of noise that the signal becomes totally submerged. It's something you would have heard earlier days when we used to have that telephone, and we used to try and speak. Sometimes there used to be a lot of mesh, especially during rainy season, and they would say, "Saab, wo telephone exchange mein pani aa gaya hai." And it is like that. So You have no signal, you have only noise. And therefore, so that's the electronic countermeasure. And then, so therefore, looking at electronic countermeasure, technologists have devised countermeasures. So this is the Tom and Jerry game which is going on in electronics. So that complete gamut is electronics warfare. So it's surveillance, it is countermeasures, it's countermeasures, it will be countermeasures, and it goes on like that.
Endless games, sir.
Now, when we look at cybertronics, today there is cyber and there's electronics. And most of the cyber also data and your videos, a lot of transfer happens through the electronic media.
Correct.
Through the radio frequency media. So today, some of the developed nations have already started talking of a cybertronic attack. And some time back, we used to talk of electromagnetic pulse. That means if you have a huge receiver, a satellite receiver or a huge receiver, it's a great thing to put a big pulse into it, which burns all electronics. If a rugged system can take on a particular temperature or a particular voltage, you will create such high voltages through this pulse that will burn off your backup system. And that's the end of it all. So really speaking, it's quite a interesting, if I may say, form of warfare, which is both in the active domain. That means you can do it even today. You can keep doing some kind of electronic surveillance or cybertronic surveillance and cybertronics countermeasures. And in war, for sure, it will be a big enabler for some, disabler for others.
It's a part of an offensive, I guess, sir.
Very true. Very true.
So, one thing one sees out of this, that the lines between the military and civilian, let me rephrase this. There used to be something called the rules of war. You didn't touch civilians, you kept them away from the entire battle and stuff like that, because the traditional aspect of war was soldiers of two countries facing off in a battlefield. Technology went up, became aircraft, ships, this, that, and everything. Today we see it's when two countries go on to war, it's the two populations that are literally fighting with each other, because the countries are attacking each other's infrastructure, which is affecting the population itself. We saw this happening when the claim came out that the Chinese had actually attacked the Mumbai, electric grid. There are two things that come out of this. As I said, one, the lines between the civil and military actions are completely going out of the window. And two, are we really that vulnerable for on an attack on something like a financial capital by the Chinese or any other entity adverse to us?
You're so right in what you said. In fact, you really have incited a good thought. What is an act of war? I mean, some time back when we had got commissioned, an act of war was when you cross the international border.
Yeah.
And it was a physical ingress. What about a electronic or a cyber ingress? Is it an act of war? If you see by the classical definition, it is. But today, that has become a very hazy affair. There's haze here. Why? Because globally, technology has helped you look deep, strike deep. And the strike, if it is kinetic, the world sees it and says you're on war, like what is happening between maybe Israel and Hamas and Gaza, or Armenia, Azerbaijan. But when it is non-kinetic, people don't call it act of war. There's a non-kinetic means, like we talked of cybertronics. Is it not an act of war? For sure it is. But is there a guideline or a legislation? I'm not sure. And I don't want to hazard a guess. But definitely, I mean, today we have to very clearly distinguish between act of war and otherwise. And to my mind, when we say act of war, we have to look at two things: the kinetic and the non-kinetic space.
Okay, correct, sir.
I'm sure United Nations would be looking at it because they are the global monitors of warfare for all of us, for peacekeeping, for peacemaking, and peace enforcement. And if not, I think you touch the right chords. It calls for looking at the non-kinetic space very clearly, the hybrid space very clearly and correctly, because I think these do construe an act of war.
Absolutely, sir, because I believe a country's army would fight on morale. When it sees its own cities being attacked and the lights being switched off over there, what kind of a morale will the army soldier have on the front line? It's going to be difficult for a commander to actually say, "Yeah, tu lad bhai, kuch nahi hai, piche sirf light gaya hai."
See, let me look at it a little differently also, Adi.
Sir,
You know, when do you go for a very formalized war? When all instruments of diplomacy that you thought you would use have gone, then military diplomacy comes in, and one way of military diplomacy is also war. It's amongst so many things. I mean, you meet as commanders, you meet as chief to chief, DGMOs, and so many such parleys happen. But war is announced only when all these instruments have really failed to give result, and the country which is going for war feels absolutely aggrieved. And that is the kinetic warfare. Now, in the non-kinetic space, like what happened on Stuxnet, what happened recently also in the same country and in the same nuclear reactor and many more, what happened in Bombay, I think it is law and order. I think it has got nothing to do with warfare. It has got to do with theft. It's international theft, if I may say. It's like drug trafficking. You have to have such provisions now that people should not, or countries should not be allowed at free will, just because they have a technological excedency or edge over you, to intrude into your space and take out information or degrade things that they're not supposed to. So I think that's another way of looking at it.
That's interesting. As a matter of fact, we also had a huge attack on the Air India database as well, which has claimed lakhs and lakhs of people to lose their data as well as their credit card details minus the password. And that was very specifically mentioned. But at the end of it, that's still data loss. So
so many such things. Yeah.
Absolutely, sir. It's happening rampantly around us. I mean, from small internet trolls on Twitter trying to chase you down to massive attacks which are taking place. As a matter of fact, we saw one of the biggest attacks happening in USA when their oil pipelines went off. They have not blamed anybody as of now, but we all know it's only 2 countries in the world that are capable of conducting such operations. So where do you think we stand? We are supposed to be the IT hub of the world and so on and so forth. I don't want to boast or anything like that, but as a concerned citizen, I'd like to know that we are protected. So do we stand in a place that we can protect ourselves from these kind of attacks?
My answer is yes. I think there is a huge amount of, if I may use the word, consciousness and commitment in this direction. Both. A lot has been done in this space. I'll be honest in admitting that I don't know it all, because as a Director General Information Systems, I had limited access to these areas. But I'm very convinced that as a nation, we are doing hell of a lot on cyber defense. Hell of a lot. I mean, today we have huge amount of hardware and software which is going into this cyber defense. We have started practicing what we ourselves call defense in depth. There are layers and layers before a person can come in. Let's look at our bank accounts as an example, something that we can easily share because it is it's a civil domain, and what is true there could well be true for all military installations as well. I mean, you don't hear of very many hacks. I'm not saying there are no loose ends. There are loose ends, but we must know that every day, a couple of ethical hackers are tasked to hack these sites,
Hmm.
to find weaknesses, to find loose ends, to find voids and close them. It's a everyday feature. Otherwise, how else can you protect the wealth of the nation which resides in banks? So today, there's hell of a lot being done about this cyber defense. And like I said, a defense in depth. So anybody who is an intruder or a likely intruder, there is a lot of surveillance and visibility to catch him. There are lots. I'm not saying that hacking is not happening. It is happening, but a lot of layers have got generated over a period of time. And as we speak today, I'm sure some more layers must be getting added.
Of course. So since
So that is the defensive part.
Hmm.
On the offensive part, well, these ethical hackers do have the ability to go offensive if the demand is there and if the need does arise. I leave it at that.
Of course, it's a sensitive thing, and I think the less said, the more understood is better. So, I'd like you to share with us some examples of this kind of warfare being seen around us, which was basically identified as, cyber or technological based warfare.
Let's look at Stuxnet as one example.
Hmm.
From the reports that I've read on that, and recent past again, there've been a lot of attacks on the same nuclear reactor. It was should I say, consortium, perhaps, between US and Israel, which put their heads together to do this activity by creating Stuxnet, and we all know what happened. So, if I may like to say on this, that I think there is a huge amount of vulnerability in this area. And when you look at any such attack, we must know that firstly there is a target, there's a cyber target, and there is somebody who wants to have an ingress into this cyber target. That means there's an intruder and there's a target. Right now, like you just mentioned, recent past we had the Air India as one of the targets.
Yes.
Why? Nobody knows. What will achieve? Nobody knows. Yes, it is a national airline. It does affect national fervor. It does affect national reputation, and therefore you feel bad about it. Then, sometime back in India itself, you talked of Bombay. We had our own CDA officers getting hacked, and all our accounts went topsy turvy. Then we have globally a large number of these attacks happening every day. There are some which I know of, which I cannot really tell you, but I would like to say that almost on a daily basis, there are a lot of such attempts happening onto your critical cyber infrastructure. There are a lot of attempts, and some are ethical to find weak spots, and some are by a intruder whom I'll call the cyber enemy or the cyber warrior. And therefore, some which get publicized are those where it is, become common knowledge. Most don't get publicized for obvious reasons. So really, to answer you correctly, I would just say that it is, to my mind, cyber war needs to have a little more ethics behind it. It's a very unethical kind of warfare. When I say unethical, Air India meant no wrong to anybody in the world. It was not affecting anybody. Why should you get it there? Bombay Electric Power Supply doesn't affect anybody. Why should you get in there? So there are no ethics in this game. And I think it needs to be made more ethical through regulation. And sometime back I said that maybe United Nations, some international body, ITU or others have to look at it. International cyber agencies have to look at it. as to how to regulate this non-kinetic warfare into and really call what is an act of war, what is theft, what is trafficking, just like we have it for drugs. And if we were to draw a little parallel between drug trafficking and cyber, I think we'll be hitting the right chords. Because this is something that is a real cause of concern. Your question is very relevant. I would not like to, uh, should I say, divulge what I should not, and only talk of what is in the open domain, which we have talked of, and I don't think we should deliberate more on it.
Appreciate that, sir. But one thing one can realize is anybody sitting with a computer set, as you just said, and a good internet connection can become an enemy of a nation. With the right skill set, this person can actually enter into systems and damage stuff um, which may affect lives of lakhs and lakhs of people. And you very rightly said, what did Air India do to anybody?
Yeah. You're so right. I mean, since Shadows in the Cloud is a report available on the net, it's a great read. It's a great read. And why? Why did he do it? What did so many people and so many institutions do to him? Nothing. But he just wanted to show the power of a cyber and maybe get a PhD out of the thesis that he wrote on it.
Uh-huh.
So whatever. I mean, obviously, intent was much beyond just a PhD. But what I'm saying is that it defeats all morals and ethics. This kind of warfare is defeating that. It is getting into trafficking. It is getting into theft of information. It is getting into mutilating something. It's like poisoning a water point. Why do you do it? Why do you want to put poison in some central water points, water tanks, which will kill people? What are you achieving by it? Nothing. It's also like COVID warfare. What has it done? If COVID is a biological weapon, what has it done globally? I mean, we've only lost so many honest and benign lives for no reason.
Created panic.
People meant no wrong. Civil population meant no wrong. And today, the whole world talks of numbers affected and the death toll and percentages, and it's become huge statistics today. Why so much of mathematics? Why so much of mathematics? Avoidable. So what I'm saying is, I think with technology, one new thing that we are finding is a lot of non-kinetic kind of warfare, which is also starting. A lot of space which is being traded to actually annihilate mankind, if I may say, in some way, to affect economies without doing much, to indulge in an act of war by other means. And I think that's a terrible use of technology. Terrible use of technology.
Absolutely. I think it was Goebbels in the 1940s when he said for the Nazi Germany that he asked the German people, "Are you ready for all-out war?" Which included, of course, the damage to the people as well. I don't think there's any such declaration which has happened between any two countries who are doing this against each other. But this is basically all-out war when they are undermining a system within the system itself. It's absolutely an insane proposition. So
it's not only all out. It is actually, if I may say, it is petty thieving. It is pettiness. To my mind, it is petty warfare, invisible warfare going on. Petty one. We achieve nothing. You've taken out my information. I felt vulnerable. I mean, you only created a lot of flutter because after some time, that information obviously will become redundant too. It's not that information is static. It is as dynamic. But it is the pettiness that is being seen, if I may say, a petty use of technology against mankind and against ethical living, ethical behavior.
I think speaking for India, what do you expect out of China, sir? I don't think anything else. It's a sad state of affairs. So finally, I'd like to ask you this question: what should India do to strengthen up its capabilities? One, in high-tech domains, and two, how far have we gotten into this part? You touched about India's capability a little bit. I'd like you to tell us the way forward now.
Okay. Now, you see, when you talk of technology, I think first thing is, do we have a national technology strategy document? That's the first requirement. We have Ministry of Information Technology and Electronics. We have the Department of Science and Technology.
Mm.
We have the National Technology Development Board in the PMO. We have Niti Aayog. We have Ministry of HRD. We have each ministry with their own technology plan. I think we are all over and nowhere that way, if you look at it. The first thing is we need to centralize technology through a legislation, like I said earlier. I'm not saying it is, I'm saying one structure, superstructure with a focus. One national technology strategy, and they say, okay, science and technology department will do this. And it has to be a, I'm sorry, I'll micromanage it. It has to be like a work time plan, work time technology plan. If I may ask, I mean, the world over today, look at Israel, look at US, look at China, look at Japan, look at South Korea, look at South Africa. There are some, look at Russia, big names in technology. Why? It is because there's a huge amount of congruence that they have developed between the government, the public space, the private space, and the academia through some legislation and central structures. In our case, we have huge number of center of excellences. We have Department of Electronics from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, some offices all over the country. Some manned by ISRO, some manned by Science and Technology, some manned by MIT, some manned by... And we have the startup system. We have so much. I think we need to put this all together through a legislation. The Atmanirbhar program and Make in India, the industrial corridor and the defense industrial base, or the defense industrial corridor as they call it. I think it's a huge plan and a huge program. But to put it right, I think we should, like I always say, not get into speed, we have to get into velocity. We are into speed, you have to get into velocity. And velocity means direction first, then speed. I think there is a need to direct the efforts correctly. Wherever the efforts are directed correctly, you're seeing results. I gave you example of IGMTP. You look at ISRO, you look at the space program, anything that is a very congruent, well-directed program with very nice timelines, okay, PSLV failed, there's a delay. GSLV failed, there's a delay. But there was a timeline. There's no R&D in the world without failure. There's no success without failure in R&D. But you need to have a work time plan. Otherwise, you don't know where you are headed, in what time you are headed, and in what direction you are headed. You have to start with end in mind. We have created a large number of centers of excellence, a lot of triple ITs and all that. Have we given them an end state plan? Have we given them an annual target to achieve in technology? I don't think so. There's too much of AI. There are too many people doing AI. Can we put these efforts together so that we don't waste human capital and we put it together actually as a consortium? So really, to summarize, I'll only say that we have a huge amount of technology muscle in the country. I think the skeleton needs to be put in place so that the muscles can make technology walk. If that answers what you want to do.
Absolutely. I think what you're saying is in very simple thing, integration of efforts so that there is loss of duplication. I think you mentioned that before as well. And the streamlining of resources which is going into a particular task. It is for such a vast country, I think it is very, very important for us to have a central commission or a central division looking at technological development for looking at this particular aspect for the armed forces and for everyone else. We've seen this over time. Stuff which is developed for the armed forces benefits humankind so much in so many different ways. I don't think when the GPS was launched with the purpose of giving Google Maps to all of us in our smartphones. it was given for positioning and targeting of missiles and other bombs and various other means and methods of war. Correct me if I'm wrong, sir.
Very true. No, in fact, internet that we use so loosely today
Yeah.
is a DARPA creation.
Yeah.
So really, you're so right in what you say, and I think as a nation we are there. We are there. It's only putting structures, policies, regulations in place, and maybe if I may say, let's get the steering. We have the wheel. We have everything. What we need is a nice steering wheel and a good GPS to get our direction right, and then look at speed. And that will be the velocity, and that's how we can vector technology, energy, and maybe have more deliverables than what we are having.
Fantastic, sir.
Be more effective.
I think this talk has been really an eye opener with regards to stuff we cannot even see, and we are at war with those things. We talk about information warfare and all those other things as well, but this is becoming a part of our lives because all of us carry our smartphones in our pocket, which are vulnerable, which are more and more connected to the wide world, and the wide world including people that are not very favorable to us. So thank you so much. I think it's going to be an eye opener for all of us, and I'm going to connect with you for another topic, another day in the domain of technological and cyber warfare.
You're always welcome. It's always a pleasure sharing such thoughts. I think, like they always say, I would like to die empty. I'm not empty today. But thank you for taking out some of it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind. Thank you.